It's me, your sister, Grace.
I'm sorry. Do I know you?
How can 6 hardworking children become poorer every single year? Why would every opportunity disappear the moment it gets close? And why did the only woman who claimed to love them secretly pray they never escaped poverty? This is not just a story about a household enemy. It is a story about what happens when forgiveness dies, but the person who refuses to forgive is your own blood. Morning came slowly over Okeado village in Oyo State. The roof of the tiny mud house leaked whenever it rained. The walls had cracked so badly that sunlight entered through tiny holes. Inside the house, 6 children were already awake. Not because they had enough sleep, but because hunger never allowed anyone to sleep for long. The eldest, David, tied an old rope around his waist before carrying his bricklaying tools. The second son, Paul, picked up his carpenter's bag. The third son, Michael, quietly folded the only neat shirt he owned. The fourth and fifth boys, James and Peter, prepared to follow older workers around the village, hoping someone would pay them for carrying cement. The youngest, 17-year-old Grace, sat quietly beside the empty cooking pot again. She gently lifted the cover. Maybe, just maybe something had magically entered the pot overnight. But there was nothing. She smiled weakly before covering it again. David noticed. Without saying anything, he searched every pocket he had. After several minutes, he found 100 naira note, only one. He stretched it towards Grace. Buy something small before going to school. Grace shook her head. What about you people? We'll eat later. But Grace knew that was a lie. There was no later. There hadn't been a later in months. Ever since their father died 2 years earlier, life had become a punishment. Their mother had died many years before after a brief illness. Their father had tried his best to raise 6 children alone. He was poor, but he loved them with everything he had. Then one day, he suddenly became very sick. No hospital could explain why his body kept growing weaker. For months, he lay on a mat. Until one cold morning, he never woke up again. The village called it fate, and the children accepted it. Only one person knew the truth, which was their father's younger sister, Auntie Rebecca. Every Sunday, Auntie Rebecca came carrying food. My children, my brother's children. She hugged every one of them. She cried with them. She prayed over them. My God will never leave you. The villagers admired her. What a wonderful woman. See how she's taking care of her late brother's children. Nobody knew the food she brought never lasted. The little help she offered always kept them alive, but never enough to move forward. Every time one of the boys got a better paying job, something happened. The employer would suddenly change his mind, a contract would disappear, money would suddenly get missing. An opportunity would collapse at the last minute. After years of disappointment, the brothers stopped asking why. They simply believed maybe God had forgotten them. One evening, Michael sat outside the house staring into darkness. David joined him and said, "You've been quiet lately." Michael hesitated. "I don't think staying here will change anything." David looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I heard there is a football academy in Lagos." David laughed softly. "You?" Michael smiled. "But brother, you know football is the only thing I've ever been good at." "I know. You've been saying that since you were 12. This time I want to try, brother." David looked at him for a while and finally spoke. "If one of us escapes this poverty, don't forget the rest of us." Michael looked straight into his brother's eyes. I swear I could never forget any of us." That same night, miles away, Auntie Rebecca sat alone in her room. The door was locked, the windows were covered. She lit a small kerosene lamp. Then she opened an old wooden box. Inside, wrapped in faded clothes, was an old photograph with two children smiling, a little boy and his younger sister. Rebecca gently touched the picture. Her face slowly changed. The kindness disappeared, only bitterness remained. She whispered, "You took my eyes, I will take your joy." Then she remembered that afternoon, more than 40 years ago, she and her older brother had been playing outside. He had been holding a pencil. Children were laughing, running and playing. And one careless moment, the pencil struck her eye. Her brother cried harder than she did. He begged for forgiveness. Their parents rushed her to the hospital, but the eye could never fully recover. Everyone said it was an accident. Rebecca nodded, but inside, she never forgave him. Not after 1 year, not after 10 years, not even after 40 years. When her brother married, she smiled. When his children were born, she smiled. When his wife died, she smiled. When he became sick, she smiled. Tonight, she smiled again. She picked up a strange polished mirror from the wooden box. The surface shined. Slowly, Michael's face appeared. He was sleeping peacefully. Rebecca narrowed her eyes. "So, you want to leave this village? We will see." She smiled, a long, terrifying smile. The bus to Lagos left before sunrise. The engine coughed as it pulled away from Okeado village, carrying young men chasing dreams and families praying for miracles. Michael sat by the window, carrying a small nylon bag. Inside the bag were two shirts, one pair of trousers, worn-out football boots, and a Bible that had belonged to his late father. As the bus began to move, he looked back one last time. Standing by the roadside were his brothers. David raised his hand. Paul forced a smile. James and Peter tried to act strong, but their eyes were already wet. Grace couldn't hold back her tears. She ran after the bus for a few seconds. "Michael, you promised you will come back for us." Michael stretched out his hands through the window. "I will, I promise. No matter what happens, I will come back." The bus disappeared into the dusty road. None of them knew that promise would take years to be fulfilled. Life in Lagos welcomed Michael with hardship. For weeks, he slept on the floor of a crowded room shared by 6 young men. Some nights, there was no food. Other nights, there was no electricity. During the day, he washed cars. In the evenings, he trained with a small local football club. People laughed at him. "Village boy, you think football is easy? You will soon go back to your village." Michael ignored them. Every evening after training, he would sit alone and whisper to himself, "I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for my family." Whenever he felt like giving up, he remembered Grace studying with an empty stomach. He remembered David carrying heavy blocks under the hot sun. He remembered his father's last word, "Take care of one another." Those words became his strength. Months turned into a year. One afternoon, during a local football tournament, a retired coach noticed Michael. He noticed how Michael played with confidence. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest, but he never stopped fighting for every ball. After the match, the coach walked over. "What's your name?" "My name is Michael." "Have you ever played professionally?" "No, sir." The coach smiled. "Come and see me tomorrow." Michael hardly slept that night. The following morning, he reported early to the man's house. The coach introduced him to a football academy in Lagos. Training became tougher. Some players quit, but Michael stayed. He remembered home. He remembered hunger. He remembered promises. Failure was no longer an option. 1 year later, everything changed. Michael signed his first professional contract with a football club. The money wasn't enough to make him rich, but it was more than enough than he had ever imagined. He rented a small apartment, bought new clothes, opened a bank account. For the first time in years, he slept on a mattress instead of the floor. He knelt beside his bed. God, my family have finally made it. Tomorrow, I'll call them. And then he lay down to sleep. But tomorrow never came. Back in Okeado village, Grace checked the community phone every market day. Maybe Michael had called, but nothing. David asked travelers returning from Lagos, "Have you seen my brother?" But they all said no. Paul kept saying, "He's probably struggling. He'll come back." Even as he said those words, he wasn't sure he believed them anymore. Every Sunday, Auntie Rebecca arrived carrying rice, beans, or gari. "My children, I know life is hard, but don't lose hope." She hugged them, she cried with them, she prayed loudly. "Heavenly Father, let every lost child remember home." The villagers wiped tears from their eyes seeing Auntie Rebecca pray for them. They would say, "Oh, what a caring woman." But only Rebecca knew that she didn't mean a single word. Late one night, Rebecca locked herself inside her room. She placed the polished mirror on the floor. Its surface slowly became clear. Michael appeared. He was laughing with teammates. Rebecca frowned. "So, you have escaped poverty, Abby?" She watched him enter his apartment. She saw the new furniture, the new television, the new phone. Rebecca became angry. "I couldn't stop your success, but I can stop your heart from remembering." She stretched out her hands towards the mirror. The room suddenly became silent. Outside, the wind stopped blowing. The lamp flickered. Rebecca whispered, "Forget where you came from. Forget every promise. Forget every face." Then the mirror went dark. Rebecca smiled. "It is done." The next morning, Michael woke up feeling strange. His phone buzzed. One of his teammates asked, "Didn't you say you had family in Oyo?" Michael frowned. I don't really keep in touch." The answer surprised even him. He couldn't explain why. Their faces suddenly felt distant, like old memories fading away. He shrugged it off. "I'll call them later." But later never came. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Whenever he tried to remember home, something distracted him. Training, matches, interviews, new friends, opportunities. The promise he made at the bus window slowly disappeared beneath the noise of his new life. Back in the village, things became worse. David injured his back carrying blocks at a construction site. The little income stopped. Paul's workshop closed after the owner relocated. James fell sick from exhaustion. Peter began doing odd jobs at the market just to buy food. Grace was the only one still in school. Her teachers admired her. "You are brilliant. You should become a lawyer." She smiled politely. Inside, she wondered if she would even finish secondary school. Some morning, she attended class without breakfast. Some afternoon, she drank only water to silence her hunger. At night, she studied under a borrowed lantern while listening to her brothers whisper about unpaid rent and empty cupboards. One evening, Grace gathered courage. "I'm going to Lagos." Then the room became quiet. David looked at her. "To do what in Lagos?" "I want to go find Michael." Paul sighed. "We don't even know where he lives." "Yes, I know. I will find him." "How?" "I'll ask people." James shook his head. "Lagos isn't like this village. Oh. You can get lost." Grace stood her ground. "If our brother is alive, then he deserves to know what we are going through." No one spoke again. Deep down, they all knew she was right. 3 days later, Grace arrived in Lagos with a small bag and just enough money for transportation. The city overwhelmed her. The noise, the traffic, the endless crowds. For 2 days, she searched. She asked at football fields. She showed Michael's old photographs to strangers. Many shook their heads, many ignored her. Just when hope was fading, a security guard outside a football training ground looked closely at the picture. "I know this man." Grace's eyes widened. "You do?" "Yes, I do. He trains here." Tears filled her eyes. At last she had found her brother. She waited outside the gate for hours. As the players walked out, she saw him. He was looking clean, healthier and well dressed. For a moment, she couldn't recognize the skinny village boy she used to know. She ran towards him. "Michael!" He turned. Their eyes met. Grace smiled through tears. "It's me. I'm Grace. I finally found you." Michael stared at her. She looked familiar, very familiar, but something inside him refused to connect the memories. He frowned politely. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Grace's smile disappeared. The world around her seemed to stop. I'm your sister." Michael looked at her face but couldn't recollect any memory. One of his teammates called from behind, "Michael, aren't you coming?" He looked back, then looked at Grace again. "If this is about money, please speak to my manager." Grace's lips trembled. "No, I didn't come for money. I came for my brother." Michael gave an awkward smile. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." He got into his car. The engine started. Grace stood there frozen. As the car drove away, she whispered to herself, "What have they done to my brother?" And far away back in Okeado village, Auntie Rebecca sat alone in her room. She looked into the mirror. She smiled. Even if they stand face to face, he still won't remember them. Then she laughed. Grace remained where she stood long after Michael's car disappeared into the busy Lagos traffic. People walked past her. Cars honked. Street traders shouted for customers. But all she could hear were the words that kept echoing in her mind. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The same brother who once carried her on his shoulders. The same brother who promised at the village bus stop. The same brother who swore he would never forget them. Had looked into her eyes and treated her like a complete stranger. Tears rolled down her cheeks. The silent kind that only come when your heart can no longer explain its pain. The security guard who had watched everything slowly walked over. "My sister, are you alright?" Grace forced a smile. "Yes, I'm okay." She turned around and quietly walked away. She never looked back. And back in Okeado village, the brothers rushed to meet her as soon as she returned. David searched her face. "You saw him?" Grace nodded. Paul smiled with excitement. "So, what did he say?" Grace tried to speak, but nothing came out. James became worried. "Grace," she finally whispered, "he doesn't know me anymore." Peter frowned. "What do you mean?" "I stood right in front of him. I called his name. I reminded him who I was. He looked at me like I was a stranger asking for money." None of them spoke. David slowly sat on the ground. He covered his face with both hands, and for the first time since their father's death, the strongest brother in the family cried openly. Weeks passed. Life became even harder. There were days when the family survived on just one meal. Other days, there was no meal at all. Still, Grace refused to complain. She continued helping her brothers however she could. Sometimes she washed clothes for neighbors. Sometimes she sold roasted corn by the roadside after school. One afternoon, while returning home, she met a young man named Kelvin. He greeted her politely. Over the next few weeks, he often bought what she was selling. Sometimes, he added extra money and told her to keep the change. Grace always thanked him. The brothers noticed. David warned her gently. "Grace, be careful. Not everyone who smiles has good intentions." And Grace nodded. "I know." But deep down, she believed Kelvin was simply kind. Months later, Kelvin began visiting more often. He spoke sweetly, he made promises, he told Grace she deserved a better life. For a young woman who had known nothing but hardship, those words felt comforting. He asked her out and they started dating, and she would always go to his house so at least she could eat and bring something for her brothers. Then one day, Grace discovered she was expecting a child. Fear immediately filled her heart. She told Kelvin, but his smile disappeared. You have to take care of it to Grace. And Grace looked at him in disbelief. I can't, I'm scared. Kelvin assured her that he would find a solution. A few days later, he gave her a drink, insisting it would solve the problem without anyone knowing. Grace trusted him. She drank it, and within hours, she became seriously ill. Her brothers rushed her to the nearest clinic. The nurses did everything they could. David held her hand tightly. Stay with us, please. Grace, stay with us. And Grace struggled to speak. Her voice had become so weak. She looked at each of her brothers, then she whispered, Don't hate Michael. He doesn't know. He promised he wouldn't leave us. A single tear rolled down David's face. I know, we know. Grace smiled faintly. Then her hands slowly slipped from David's body. The room became painfully quiet. The only sister in the family was gone. The news spread across the village. Even Auntie Rebecca came to the house crying louder than anyone else. My poor daughter, oh God, why is this family suffering so much? The neighbors gathered around to comfort the brothers. Nobody questioned Rebecca. Nobody imagined she was smiling inside. Hundreds of kilometers away, Michael was preparing for one of the biggest matches of his career. As he tied his boots, a sharp pain shot through his head. He grabbed the side of the bench. His teammates rushed over. Michael, are you okay? Images suddenly flashed through his mind. A leaking roof, a little girl laughing, an old mud house. His father's voice, David, Paul, James, Peter and Grace. The boss leaving the village, the promise he made to them. Then Michael fell to his knees. His breathing became heavy. Then he shouted, Grace! Everyone around him froze. The memories returned all at once. He remembered everything. Then tears came instantly. Oh God, what have I done? Without waiting for the match, he left the stadium and traveled straight to Okeado village. The journey felt longer than ever. Every kilometer filled him with more guilt. He kept calling the old village number, but there was no answer. He prayed the whole way, Lord, please save my family. Let them still be alive. As his car entered the village, something felt wrong. People stood quietly outside. Women wore black wrappers. A white canopy had been set up in front of the old family house. Michael's heart began pounding. He stopped the car before it reached the compound. An elderly neighbor recognized him. Michael, you finally come? Michael smiled weakly. Where is Grace? The old man lowered his head. You came too late. Michael didn't wait for another word. He ran. As he entered the compound, he saw a framed photograph of Grace, decorated with flowers. His legs gave way and he collapsed onto the ground. No, no, no. David slowly walked toward him. The two brothers looked at each other. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Michael whispered, I'm sorry. David's eyes filled with tears. We looked for you. Grace looked for you. You looked into her face and said you didn't know her. Michael broke down completely. I remember everything now. I don't know what happened then. I don't know why. I tried. I failed all of you. The brothers embraced each other weeping. Years of pain poured out in one moment. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat outside the house where he had grown up. Then he noticed Auntie Rebecca watching him from a distance. She smiled gently. "My son, don't blame yourself. Some things are destiny." Michael looked at her. For a moment, a strange feeling settled in his heart. He remembered something his father once said: "When someone always enjoys your pain, be careful." Michael quietly followed Auntie Rebecca the next evening. She walked alone to an old abandoned hut at the edge of the village. She looked around carefully before entering. Michael remained outside. Through a small opening in the wall, he saw the polished mirror. He watched Rebecca speaking to it. "I kept them where I wanted. I made sure they never rose together. I made him forget. I made the father leave before his time. But one girl, that stubborn Grace, even after everything, she still believed her brother would return." Rebecca suddenly laughed. Then she picked up the old childhood photograph. She stared at her blind eye. "It should have been me with a happy family, not my brother." Michael's blood ran cold. His hands trembled. He stepped into the room and called, "Auntie Rebecca." The smile disappeared from her face. She slowly turned around. You remember?" Michael's voice shook with anger and heartbreak. "All these years, we thought life was against us. We blamed ourselves. We blamed God. But it was you." Rebecca tried to deny it, but the years of bitterness had become too heavy. She fell to her knees. "I forgave your father with my mouth, but never with my heart. I allowed one childhood accident to become the reason I destroyed my own family." She burst into tears. "I wanted him to feel my pain. I didn't know my hatred would consume everyone." The villagers who had followed Michael after seeing him rush toward the hut heard every word. The entire village stood in stunned silence. Rebecca covered her face. "There is no punishment greater than living with what I have done." No one celebrated because nothing could bring Grace back. Nothing could return the years the brothers had lost. Nothing could erase the pain. Months later, Michael rebuilt the family house. David opened his construction company. Paul established the carpentry workshop and trained young apprentices for free. James and Peter started a successful building material business together. Michael created a scholarship in Grace's name, paying school fees for girls in the village who could no longer afford an education. Every year, on Grace's birthday, the brothers gathered beneath the old mango tree where they used to play as children. They laughed, they remembered, and before leaving, Michael always said the same words: "Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but refusing to forgive can destroy the future." If the story touched your heart, remember this: sometimes the greatest enemy is not a stranger, but the bitterness someone secretly carries for years. Unforgiveness doesn't only wound the person holding it, it can spread pain to everyone around them. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video so more people can see it. Subscribe for more emotional and dramatic stories inspired by everyday life. And tell me in the comments, at what point did you realize Auntie Rebecca was behind the family suffering? And if you were Michael, would you have forgiven her after everything that happened? Until the next story, take care of your heart, because the choices we make today can shape generations tomorrow.